Spoilers ahead. Watch out, and take care. The movie begins with Bacon, who is selling stolen goods on the street. He has a flair for persuading people to buy his shares without hesitation. Ed, his accomplice in crime, who is posing as a potential buyer, suddenly shouts. Bacon notifies him that the cops are on their way, so they both flee. Ed's true expertise is in cards and card gaming. He walks into the business, and approaches two men, Tom, who is currently being handled by Nick for a stolen stereo. Tom appears to become tired of Nick's haggling, and assures him it's the deal of the century. Nick succumbs to his fear of losing, and grudgingly purchases the item at the agreed price. He then takes a large hefty wad of money from his pocket, and counts out 200 of it, scarcely making a dent. They mock Nick for being as tight as a duck, and Tom is presented as the group's entrepreneur. After that, Ed and Bacon enter a chef's kitchen. Soap, the chef, is the fourth member of the crew. He is given this moniker because of his tenacity in abstaining from any illegal activities. He's proud of his profession, and he's even more proud that it's legal. Soap takes out a wad of cash, 25 grand. The remainder of the team contributes the same amount, totaling 100,000. Ed exits the kitchen, declaring it is time to contact Harry, aka the businessman, who decides who can and cannot join in underground poker games. Over the phone, Harry asks Ed if he has the 100,000 and informs if they say yes, they're in, and abruptly hangs up. Harry asks his right-hand man, Barry, how Eddie is. Eddie is a thief according to Barry. Barry is Harry's number one guy, nicknamed the Baptist. He's in charge of making sure the business's administrative side operates smoothly, which basically entails making sure everyone pays their bills to Harry, usually by force. He warns Harry that Ed is a card wizard, inferring that they should keep an eye out for him. The boys all gather at Ed's place. Ed is counting the money to ensure they have the full 100,000. Bacon tells Tom he can always hear his neighbors through the walls, and that they rob drug dealers. At a new location, we meet the stoners who own a farm. Winston and Willie are the ringleaders. Winston asks Charles, what do they have the cage for if they don't keep it locked? When another housemaid is let through the front door. Charles mumbles an explanation, claiming it's simply Willie, and that he lives here. Winston rolls his eyes and points out he opened the door before realizing it was Willie. Winston becomes enraged, and insists on keeping the cage shut. Willie is followed by a girl named Gloria, who is plainly baked out of her mind. Then we meet Big Chris, Harry's hired muscle. Little Chris, his son and protege, is accompanying him on business tasks. Barry verifies to Harry that Ed appears to have acquired the 400,000, and says Ed's father owns a pub, implying that Harry will be able to take over the bar with no drama, in case something goes wrong. Harry switches the subject, telling Barry to get these vintage muskets he's been eyeing, before they're auctioned off. Now Barry assigns the task of stealing the muskets to Gary and Dean, the Dumb and Dumber. Ed appears with a sack containing all of his crew's money. It is Ed's first meeting with Harry on the night of the huge poker game. He introduces himself to the other players and the dealer. He remembers them from his card-playing days. Meanwhile, since the other boys are not permitted to attend the event, they congregate at a neighboring tavern, called Samoan Joe's. Dumb and Dumber come outside the home, muskets drawn. They break in, but they don't appear to have a plan. Gary binds the owners, and demands to know where the money is kept. Dean approaches him with the muskets in his hands, and claims that these folks are poor. Then an old-timer, Adam Noah, comes out, and tries to shoot them, but just misses. As the poker game progresses, Harry cheats, having Barry view it via a hidden camera. He increases the weight, which Ed lacks, so he cannot continue. Harry offers to lend him the extra money, and Ed agrees to the loan, but subsequently loses his hand. Harry insists the money be returned in less than a week. Ed exits and vomits at the thought of how much trouble he's gotten himself into. When he arrives at the pub, he announces the bad news to the guys. In the middle of their conversation, they claim if they don't pay back on time, Harry will start severing fingers. The intercom starts buzzing at the stoner's residence. Willie ignores Wisdom's reminder to use the cage, and simply opens the door, instructing him to listen to chill, because it's only Plank coming in. Plank is there to purchase stuff. Plank is seen relaying information on the stoners to a man named Dog. He's the boss of Jack and his gang, who live next door to Ed. He informs him he's been buying marijuana from them for years, and they're an easy target for robbers. He said their security gate is never locked. We see the other men when they're having this talk, who overhear the entire scheme. Big Chris and Little Chris go to a meeting with Harry, who tells them about the boys, who owe $500,000. The lads assemble, and Ed reveals his new strategy for getting Harry's money, recommending they wait until the neighbors rob these contributors, then rob them. Ed asks Tom to speak with Nick the Bubble about moving the stuff for money once they've stolen it. When Tom meets Nick, Nick confirms he knows Rory Breaker, who will be interested in purchasing high-quality stuff from them. He only requires a sample. Then Tom asks if he could acquire a pair of firearms. To get the guns, Barry meets Dumb and Dumber. When he inquires about the two old-looking muskets, they reveal they sold them. Barry threatens to kill them if they don't bring them back to him. It turns out Nick purchased the muskets, which he sold to Tom. Tom makes a couple of jokes about the firearms look, claiming they lack criminal credibility. Big Chris informs Ed's father, who is played by Steam for some reason. Sting is annoyed because Harry likes his bar, and wants to buy it from him. Big Chris informs him about Ed's $500,000 debt, which he must repay to Harry within 3 days. Meanwhile, Bacon overhears the neighbors returning to the apartment, after the robbery to unload everything. The neighbors have arrived at the Stoner's house to carry out the robbery. Plank rings the intercom and requests for Willie. Charlie says Willie isn't home, which is a lie, because we witness William and Winston calculating their money. Plank pushes for letting him in, claiming he's pursuing a large sum of money. This time, Winston is opposed to letting Planks in, although Willie persuades him to. When Planks enters, he discovers for the first time the gate is shut. Planks, thinking on his feet, grabs Charles and threatens him with a gun to unlock the gate, causing Charles to pass out. Planks and the rest of the crew yell and decide to intervene. He fights to take the keys from an unconscious Charles when they appear at the door. They start yelling at each other, because the gate is still closed. Winston and the other stoners have realized they're almost there. They use a small air pistol to shoot at the neighbors, via a little hatch. It doesn't appear to do much, other than irritate them. The thugs then blow off Charles' toes. Winston tells Willie that he's going down, and urges him to figure out a solution. When the goons eventually make it through the fence, they grab Winston, and demand to know where they had hidden the money. Winston claims it's up the back, where Willie is hiding. Willie stands there, clutching a machete, which does not work out as well as he had intended, and he gets killed. The goons discover the stuff and cash in the back of the house. While piling everything into the van, one of them comes across a traffic warden, who is about to issue them a parking ticket. They knock him out, and load him into the van with the rest of the stuff. One of the guys approaches Willie, seeking to confirm he is indeed dead. Gloria then appears out of nowhere. She was there the entire time, in full couch potato mode. She pulls out a machine gun, and begins shooting. Unfortunately, she barely lands a couple bullets in, and fails to kill Dog and Planks. They simply knock her out after she's out of bullets and no longer a threat. Meanwhile, the boys break into their next-door neighbor's apartment to lay their trap. When the neighbors arrive, the guys leap from their hiding places, and get right down to business. They swiftly get the neighbors out of their bind, and drive up to their car's parking spot to reload it. They find they have some unexpected bags at this point. They eventually return to put everything in their apartment for safekeeping, according to the parking officer. Tom instructs Nick to sell the stolen stuff as quickly as possible. Nick jumps right into Mr. Rory Breaker. He wants to seek a second assessment of the stuff's quality. Nick then walks away, stating he'll call him later. Mr. Breaker soon discovers that his stuff supplier has been robbed. Turns out the stoners are working for him. The boys are now attempting to resell the stolen pot to its rightful owner. The men believe it's time to rejoice, believing their difficult times are over. Mr. Breaker asks to meet Nick, in order to find out who the fools are, who are attempting to sell him stuff. The neighbors are anxiously trying to discover who robbed them, and none of them can figure out who did it. Dog becomes enraged and begins pounding his lackeys. Among the chaos, Plank's head bursts through the wall, and discovers a slew of recording devices. Dumb and Dumber, who are now seeking to reclaim their muskets, call Nick and insist they must return them. Nick warns him he cannot, because they have already been sold to someone, and he will almost certainly never see those individuals again. He becomes irritated and simply hangs up on them. They deliver the terrible news to Barry, who informs him he doesn't care, and they must reclaim the guns. Harry then takes the phone from Barry, stating unequivocally that it is in their best interests, and reinvigorates them. The two guys call Nick again to see who he had sold to. Mr. Breaker and his henchmen rush to Ed's apartment, strapped from head to toe, and the boys are on their way to Ed's place at the same time. When Mr. Breaker comes, Planks is inside, visibly perplexed and unsure of what is going on, and begins shooting. This results in a traditional shootout. Dog sneaks off with the muskets and money bags, hearing the guns from the other room. He then meets Big Chris, who has been dispatched to Ed's by Harry, to deliver a message concerning their remaining time to pay. Big Chris confiscates all the goodies and tips with a small headbutt. This is all witnessed by Dumb and Dumber, who are waiting outside for the muskets to be returned. Ed's house has been demolished. Winston, fortunately, survives. He drives off with as much stuff as he can carry, and almost runs into the boys who have just come. When they return, they learn they are in much bigger trouble. There are dead bodies all around the place, and worst of all, the money and all the stuff have been stolen. Big Chris brings everything to Harry, including the firearms, and informs him the boys had them. Next, Dumb and Dumber see Big Chris leave the building outside Harry's house. They're working on a strategy to get the guns back, and enter the building, without knowing anything about the relationship between Barry and Harry. Ed phones Harry, but before he can tell him the bad news, Harry interjects that he got the money and doesn't care how Ed and the boys got it. However, he is concerned about how the firearms got into their hands. He says to meet him in his office right away, to straighten things up. Dean comes into Harry's doorway after the phone call, clutching the gun. Harry is cleaning the musket, and shooting begins. Hearing the shots, Gary decides to charge in, guns blazing. He is suddenly slashed from behind by an axe. He does a 180-degree scope, and realizes the person who hurled the axe was Barry. When Big Chris gets back into his car, Dog is seated in the back, with a knife to his son's throat, and wants his money back. Big Chris reveals the money is in the office, and begins driving toward Harry's office building. Ed and Tom arrive at Harry's place, and when they enter his office, they see everyone dead, including Harry. Ed decides to take the money bags, and they decide to flee. Tom assures Ed that he will catch up. Ed gets inside the car. The other boys are waiting for him. When they ask what's going on, Ed answers Harry is no longer alive, so there is no more debt. Big Chris then slams his car into their back. He exits the car and begins banging the car door into Dog's skull like a lunatic. He walks up to the boys' car. When he opens the door, he notices the men have the cash. He takes the luggage and returns to Harry's office. When Big Chris enters the room, he runs into Tom, who is clutching the muskets. They decide not to interact with each other. Big Chris walks away with a sack full of cash, and Tom has all the guns. When the cops arrive, they arrest everyone. Sting wants to know if the boys are safe, when Ed exits the police station. Ed claims it looks to be the case, because everyone else is dead. We then see the boys who meet in the bar. Tom informs them of what occurred at the police station. As a result of the traffic warden identifying the neighbors from the dead bodies, the lads are no longer suspects. The only thing left in the case are the muskets. So they assign Tom to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Tom walks away and travels towards a bridge, where he will dump the firearms into the river. Big Chris walks into the pub, and tosses a bag on the table in front of the boys. He thanks them and threatens to not look for him, and leaves. Except for a pistol magazine, the bag looks empty. They assume it's nothing, until they see a page with the muskets on it, which says they're valued between $200,000–300,000 each. The boys try to immediately call Tom. Meanwhile, Tom attempts to throw the firearms off the bridge, but at the same time his phone is in his mouth and ringing. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out.